We love the idea that a crowd is a kind of madness, that something happens in a mob, the individual dissolves, the conscience clicks off, and ordinary people become capable of anything. It's in every film about a riot, every headline about a stampede, every lazy explanation of why people are sheep. Here's the problem. The science doesn't say crowds make good people evil. It says something far more unsettling and far more useful. Crowds don't delete who you are, they change which you is in charge. Start with that New York story because it built the whole myth. The 1964 murder of Kitty Genovese was reported as 38 witnesses watching a killing and refusing to help. It launched 1,000 lectures on the bystander effect and human coldness. But later investigations, including a 2007 review by Rachel Manning and colleagues, showed the famous 38 who did nothing was a newspaper exaggeration. Several people did react. At least one call was made. The number was wrong, the indifference overstated. So the founding parable of the heartless crowd was, itself, partly fiction. That should make us suspicious of the rest of the myth. And yet the experiments that followed seemed to confirm it. In 1968, John Darley and Latané ran the studies that gave us the real bystander effect. People who believed they were the only witness to an emergency helped almost every time. People who believed others were also present helped far less and far slower. They called it diffusion of responsibility. In a crowd, the duty to act gets spread so thin that everyone assumes someone else will. Notice what this is not. It isn't evil, it's a maths error about responsibility. Each person is being reasonable, and the group fails anyway. Then there's conformity. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch sat people in a group and asked them which of 3 lines matched a reference line. The answer was obvious. But the rest of the group were actors, instructed to give the same wrong answer out loud. Around 3/4 of real subjects caved and agreed with the obvious falsehood at least once. We bend toward the group even when our own eyes tell us it's wrong, not because we're stupid, but because being the lone dissenter is socially expensive, and we feel that cost in our gut. And obedience, the most infamous studies of all. In 1963, Stanley Milgram had ordinary volunteers deliver what they believed were escalating electric shocks to a stranger, simply because a man in a lab coat told them to continue. Roughly 2/3 went all the way to the maximum, supposedly lethal voltage. For 60 years, that was the proof. Put a normal person under authority and they'll hurt an innocent. The dark crowd made of obedient atoms. Except, and this is the heart of the episode, those famous studies are far shakier than your school textbook admitted. This honesty is the whole point. Take Milgram. When the psychologist Gina Perry went back into his archives, she found the picture was messier than the headline. Obedience varied enormously between versions of the study. The experimenter often improvised and pressured people far beyond the script. And many participants later said they hadn't truly believed the shocks were real. The clean 65% number hides a far more complicated reality. Now the Stanford Prison experiment, the 1971 study where students playing guards supposedly became spontaneously cruel. For decades it was the ultimate proof that roles corrupt us. But in 2019, the researcher Thibault Letexier examined the original recordings and documents. The guards weren't spontaneously sadistic. They were briefed, encouraged, and in some cases explicitly told to be tough. The cruelty wasn't a crowd revealing human nature. It was, in part, demanded by the people running it. The most famous Crowds Make Monsters study was closer to a piece of theater. So what replaces the myth? In 2002, Stephen Riker and Alexander Haslam reran a prison study for the BBC and found people do not automatically slide into their assigned roles. Whether a group turned tyrannical depended on whether people came to share an identity and whether they saw their leaders as legitimate. Tyranny wasn't automatic, it had to be built. And the de-individuation idea, the notion that anonymity in a crowd simply unleashes our worst impulses, got a serious downgrade too. A 1998 meta-analysis by Tom Postmers and Russell Spears found that anonymous crowds don't descend into random chaos. They follow the norms of the specific group they belong to. A peaceful crowd gets more peaceful. A hostile one gets more hostile. The crowd doesn't erase your rules. It swaps your personal rules for the group's. And the helping research turned hopeful. In 2019, Richard Philpott's team analyzed CCTV footage of hundreds of real public conflicts across 3 countries. In around 9 out of 10, at least one bystander stepped in. In real life, on real streets, people help far more than the myth claims. So here's what crowds actually do. They don't switch off your conscience. They change which identity is loudest, who you treat as us, and who you grant the right to tell you what to do. Decent people do terrible things in groups, not because the group makes them mindless, but because the group convinces them, for a moment, that the terrible thing is right, or that it's someone else's job to stop it. That's scarier than mob madness, because it can't be dismissed as other people losing their minds. It's the most normal thing in the world, and the antidote isn't pretending you're immune. It's noticing, in the moment, which crowd you've joined and asking whether you'd still do this if you were the only one watching.